right, hi guys. So this week we are going to be once again focusing on texture and the ways that we can create texture in our artwork. So last week we made a wreath and we used some objects that gave us some tactile texture, some texture that we can feel with our fingers on our work of art. This week we're going to be using some visual texture, so textures that we can see with our eyes. And I have a couple of different ways I'm going to do this today. One of them is I'm going to be stamping using paint. And you can use a bunch of different things to stamp texture into paint to create the leaves of our tree. But if you happen to not have paint at home, don't worry. We can still create some great visual textures using crayon or colored pencils or whatever you have at home. So that's what I'm going to be doing first before I go in with the paint. And I went outside out by our school and I found a couple of leaves that I think I want to include in my artwork as some texture. So instead of gluing them on top, I am going to take this, look how cool this leaf is. It was so big, it's nice and dried. It might crunch a little bit when I put it underneath my paper, but that's okay. So instead of putting it on top, I'm gonna put it underneath my paper. And then I have some of these crayons that I have peeled the paper off of. And this is very important because you want to use the side of the crayon and not the top of it to do this technique. And we're just going to rub on top of our leaf and try to get some of that great texture onto our work of art. So here I go with a orange crayon. And I'm going over, you can hear my leaf crunching underneath. I'm going over this area and I'm trying to get all of these really cool stems on my work of art and the outline of my leaf. You can see it starting to appear like magic, right? When I rub the side of the crayon, it picks up all that great texture of that leaf underneath, and then you can start seeing some of the veins in the leaf, some of the outlines. So that's a pretty cool technique if you don't have any paint this week and you want to do a little bit of crayon rubbing to include some leaf texture on your work. I'm sure you could find some awesome leaves outside your house. So let's try this one. This one's kind of small and I'm putting it underneath my paper and I obviously can't see it anymore. So then I'm going to feel on top of my work of art with my hands to see where my leaf is before I start going in and shading. So I think now I'm going to use this really pretty purple color for this leaf. Oh, that looks really cool. I love the way that's turning out. So I like that one. I might do one more of those little leaves down here. And I want it to kind of look like it's coming off this tree branch. So I'm feeling it with my fingers to be sure I know where it is. And then now I'm gonna go in with this red crayon. I'm gonna try to get that leaf shape. So I like that. And even if you are planning on painting this week, this would be a cool thing to do underneath your painting, just like I did. So I'm using a couple of different colors of paint. I chose some colors that were kind of fall inspired for my fall tree. And I'm gonna use a couple of different things to stamp into my paint besides a paintbrush. The first thing that I'm using is just a paper towel. And I'm gonna crumple it up. Paper towels are kind of soft. They're really absorbent, so they're gonna absorb some of this paint. And then I'm also gonna be using a piece of paper to crumple up and do the same thing because this one's way softer than my crumpled up paper. So I think they're gonna look different when I stamp with them. So here I go. I'm gonna go into my lightest color first, my yellow. And I crumpled it up the best I could in kind of an interesting way. Tin foil would also be super cool if you wanted to crumple up some tin foil and then paint with that. And then I'm just gonna go around and I'm gonna stamp around my tree branches. You can draw your tree branches with anything that you want. You could paint them if you want to. You could draw them with marker or crayon like I did here. I wanted it to stand out a little bit from my leaves. So I used marker to make that stand out really well. And you can see that great texture that's coming off of my crumpled paper towel. That's pretty awesome. So now let's try a piece of paper. And I'm gonna tear off a piece. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna crumple it up in a really small ball. And then I'm gonna kind of uncrumple it a little bit so I have some edges for my paint to stick to. I really like that side of it. I think that's gonna look cool when I stamp. So now I'm gonna go into my second color, my orange. And I'm gonna try to get as much paint on there as I can. And then I'm just gonna go back over and stamp using that orange. Oh, that is really cool. I like the way that that crumpled paper creates a different texture than my paper towel that I used. That's really interesting. And I'm liking the way this texture looks on top of my rubbed texture as well. So I'm going to do just a little bit of orange, and you can use as many colors as you want. Now I might do, I think, some red. So I'm going to tear off another piece of paper. I'm going to crumple it up. And each time you crumple whatever you're using to stamp, it's going to look a little bit different. So now I'm going in with my red. That looks really awesome. And be sure that if you're working on a surface that you're worried about getting dirty and you're using paint, that you're laying down something on that surface before you start painting, like maybe an old grocery bag, to protect that surface from your paint, unless you're on something that your grown-up says is washable. And then just like me, you can go ahead and paint right off the edge and then clean it up with some water later. Remember, we're responsible for our own messes. Okay, so the last color I'm gonna do is I got this really pretty purple color. So I'm gonna crumple up my last piece of paper, and this one's got some really great torn edges on it. So I think I'm gonna use this side. I'm gonna dip it into my purple paint. And then this is going to be the very last layer of my tree. And you can see that the texture of what I'm using to stamp almost kind of looks like leaves on this tree. That's kind of what we're going for this week. Of course, you don't have to do a tree if you don't want to, but we thought that this would be kind of fun for fall, that if you wanted to do like an animal or something else that you enjoy and just practice stamping these different textures onto your paper with paint, or using the technique that I showed you at the beginning with the crayons and rubbing on top of leaves or things that you find outside. We can't wait to see how you create some visual texture that your eyes can see this week, and we can't wait to respond to you. So hope you guys have a fun time creating your art this week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.